Good morning on this Sunday, August 20th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Former President Donald Trump and 18 others indicted in Fulton County have until Friday at noon to turn themselves in. DA Fani Willis says she wants the trial to start March 4th, one day before the Super Tuesday primaries. And a Cobb County teacher who read a controversial book to her 5th grade class learns her fate. Melita and Phil are here. Alicia Thomas-Cersei is filling in for Theron, and Brian Robinson is here filling in for Martha. What a show we have. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
All eyes are now on the Fulton County Jail, where former President Trump and 18 others indicted this week have until Friday at noon to turn themselves in. Republican and Democratic leaders in Georgia said Monday marked a dark day in our country.
These indictments have nothing to do with enforcement of the law and everything to do with gaining political advantage.
Georgia's Republican Chairman Josh McCoon accused District Attorney Fani Willis of using her position to get famous and advance her career. McCoon's predecessor, David Schaefer, is among those who have been indicted. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party chair, Congresswoman Nikema Williams, claims this was beyond politics.
Listen to the facts in this case, and you will understand that there is no partisanship when it comes to truth and justice.
On top of Governor Kemp's statement that the election was secure and fair, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger said, quote, "The most basic principles of a strong democracy are accountability and respect for the Constitution and rule of law," adding, quote, "You either have it or you don't."
Do we really want to make it normal in America for the loser of an election to face criminal prosecution?
Chairman McCoon argued they did things by the book, and they were preparing that slate of alternate electors to serve if their legal challenges were successful.
On Monday night, the rule of law prevailed once again in Fulton County when my district attorney, Fani Willis, secured a 41-count indictment against Donald John Trump and 18 of his lackeys.
We had heard 10 to 20 people would be indicted, but in the end, all 19 charged with violating the state's RICO Act. Now let's run the table. Phil, to you first. Just your initial thoughts.
Well, I've said before, and I've talked to a lot of criminal defense attorneys over the last couple of weeks of all political stripes, and sometimes I don't even know their politics, and they all say this is a terrible overreach to use this RICO law because, as we all know, it's used against mob bosses and murderers, etc. It's not to be used with people when you're trampling on their First Amendment rights. That's point number one. I'm really worried, having been a journalist. Lori, you know this. Our careers were based on protected speech when we gave opinions or news articles and information. And so when you're talking about, for example, I'm texting the Secretary of State of a different state, you know, is that a conspiracy if I do 3 or 4 states? Some of the stuff is just protected speech. That's what really bothers me for the most part. And also, I didn't know Fani Willis had jurisdiction in Coffee County or 12 other states. I think that she's put in these federal people. I don't think she should have put in the federal people. I think that should have been a federal court. I've said that all along. So there's a lot of weaknesses in this case.
Melita.
Well, the attorneys I've talked to don't see quite the weaknesses that Phil cites. There is nothing about the First Amendment which protects criminal behavior. There is also nothing about the practice of law which requires a lawyer to break the law to defend a client. And lastly, you know, this indictment includes 7 attorneys, including 1 former U.S. Attorney General. And the lawyers I've talked to say, we'll defend anybody, but we won't go to jail for them. And so there's a lot to this indictment. It's 161 separate acts, 41 counts outlined over 97 pages, 161 predicate acts, 30 unindicted co-conspirators, and it's a big puzzle that does go across state lines, that does include acts in Coffee County. It's a complicated case that Fonnie Willis and her assistant DAs have worked very hard to put together.
Brian, you can give us your opinions, but also I want to ask you, the Fulton County Sheriff says that these folks will be prosecuted like any other defendant who comes through the Fulton County Jail. But we are talking about the former leader of the free world going into a facility where an inmate died of bed bug infestation. So like, how safe will this be? And, will the Secret Service have a say?
Oh, I'm sure the Secret Service will be showing up to have a conversation with the sheriff. And let me say on that, this is a mistake. I understand the need to act like everyone is treated equal in our democracy and in our system of justice. But we take those mugshots so that we can recognize somebody who perhaps skips bail or somebody who commits a second offense while they're out on bail. Donald Trump is the most recognizable face in the entire universe. Why in the world would we need to do that for practical purposes? The other jurisdictions, even those that are overtly political, like the New York case, didn't do it. I think that's the right precedent to follow here. It can be used for political purposes, and that will undermine Fonnie's case further, because many people already think that this is a political case. And to me, this is a federal case, not a Fulton County case. Phil hit on this to some degree. A lot of these folks never came to Atlanta, never came to Fulton County. Coffee County obviously is not in Fulton County. It's way too broad, and this is at a time when the Young Thug case has been trying to seat a jury for 8 months, a time when Fulton County taxpayers have been informed of a property tax increase on the most highly taxed taxpayers in the state. Why are we putting resources into something that should not be done in Fulton County?
Alicia, Fonnie Willis is proposing a March 4th trial date with 19 defendants. I mean, is that going to be possible? And let's talk about the politics of this too. It's Super Tuesday. It's the Georgia primary. Is that even possible? I mean, we talked about the jury seating for the Young Thug trial is still happening. I think it's been 6 months. So your thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts on a lot of things. This is a...
I'm trying to keep it moving.
This is a lot, Lori. So here's what I'll say about the March trial. We don't know. First of all, it's not even up to Fonnie Willis, right? It's up to a judge this judge who has been assigned this case. He's going to be too busy all next year, right? He's in D.C. in January for that trial. He's in Manhattan in March for that one.
Donald Trump.
Yes, Donald Trump I'm talking about. May 20th, he's supposed to be in South Florida. So he's got a busy schedule on top of trying to be president of the United States again. He's got all these trials going on. And so it's ambitious, but it's important. Let me say this very quickly about the jail. I struggled with this for a little while. I'm a former elected official. I think, elected officials, candidates, whatever, should sometimes be afforded certain courtesies. But then I thought about it. Because of the lies, the conniving, the manipulation, because of this enterprise that was created and also ended in losing 5 people on January 6th, he needs, for the first time, Donald Trump, for the first time in his life, needs to be held accountable. This is a man who said in public that he could go on Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and not lose any votes. Never in his life has he been held responsible for anything that he said or he's done. And so I think maybe going to the Fulton County Jail, of all jails, with all the problems that it has, maybe he could use a little humbling to spend some time there.
Phil, you can respond also, but I also want to ask you, because Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, has already filed a motion to get his case moved to federal court. Some others are expected to follow suit. This means the same charges, but a different jury pool.
Right. Well, I think Mark Meadows is smart to go to the federal level, and that's kind of segues into what Brian was saying too. I think it was an overreach, and I want to remind my colleague here and friend, you have to prove criminal intent. You can say everything you want. Oh, that's a lie, and that's a misstatement. Well, there's some sincerity here. You can be wrong. In this country, we have a right to be wrong. And I really, and we're going to talk about it later, I know, Lori, but I'm worried about I hate to see lawyers being dragged into this too, and we can talk about that later. But I think for right now, I don't know, and he's my friend, I don't know why the Attorney General of the state, the chief law enforcement officer, is not weighed in. I would think that he would say at least that this is a bridge too far, that why are we doing these federal cases? And I agree with Brian, this is far too much for the taxpayers of Fulton County.
Melita, let's talk also about the judge selected to preside over the case, 34-year-old Scott McAfee. Fairly new to the bench. I think he's been on it 6 months.
not even 6, I think. He was appointed in February. But
last December.
Well, he's an exceptionally bright young man. He went to Emory on a music scholarship. Last night, the AJC released this video of him shredding an electric cello playing the national anthem from high school that had a lot of views when I saw it. He gets high grades from previous attorneys who've practiced in front of him. He is a former DA, so it is a big case and a lot to put on the shoulders of someone so young, but he's a former Eagle Scout, and I put high marks for anybody who went through that process. It sounds like he is up for the challenge.
Brian, former President Trump canceled a planned news conference that he was planning tomorrow. He said he had a 100-page report on election fraud in Georgia. This is where we saw Governor Brian Kemp weigh in, saying that the election was not stolen in 2020.
Yes, and thank God that Governor Kemp has the courage to stand up and say that, because there's not a lot in it for him. A lot of his base doesn't want to talk about this, and frankly, he doesn't want to talk about this, but somebody's got to keep setting the record straight. I don't know who around President Trump convinced him to cancel this, but it was really good advice. As Governor Kemp keeps saying, and he's right, if Republicans, no matter who it is, Trump or anybody else, are going to win in 2024, and it's important for the nation that we do, then we have got to stop looking at 2020 and start talking about 2025 and what our vision for America is. It is my opinion that it's better than the Democrats' vision. But if we're talking about this, we are going to lose. You cannot be talking about this and win Georgia next year, and you cannot win the White House without Georgia.
Well, still lots to discuss. Coming up, several Georgians also charged with racketeering in this Fulton County case. We'll take a deeper dive into who they are after the break.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Political and legal experts were surprised to learn 19 people in all were indicted in Fulton County this week by a grand jury, including former President Donald Trump. Brian, let's talk about the alternate electors first. David Schaefer oversaw the meeting of these alternate electors, and then State Senator Sean Still was one of them. Both of them indicted?
Yeah, I think this is one of those areas of great overreach. These guys are not criminals. We all know these people, right? These are folks who are active in the party. They care about their country. They were told that this was a court case, and this was a mechanism to that was going to be needed if they succeeded in court, and that if it didn't succeed in court, and eventually it did not, it would get dropped. It didn't succeed, and it got dropped. No one stormed the Capitol. No one showed up and said, no, we're the real electors. They dropped it. They did what they were told to do by people that they trusted. And it's tragic that these folks have been put under a microscope, had their lives put through a ringer for 2.5 years. Enough is enough. Leave these people alone. But I'll say, it does undermine the case against their major target, who is Trump, because these are weak links in this case. And you have a weak link, the defendants can attack that link and break the whole chain. It's something that's, I think, dangerous for Fonnie's prosecution.
Well, Alicia, let's talk about the folks indicted who reached out to Fulton County elections worker Ruby Freeman. They include a police chaplain from Illinois, Stephen Cliffgard Lee, Harrison Floyd, who was director of Black Voices for Trump, and also Trevion Cuddy, a former publicist for Kanye West. It's an interesting mix of folks here.
It is, and if you read the indictment, which I hope everyone does, you will learn that the real tragedy, Brian, is that you have elected officials, candidates, who sign sworn statements knowing that they are breaking the law. I don't care what a lawyer told them. If your lawyer tells you to go rob a liquor store, you're not going to do that because you know it's against the law. And so the tragedy is you have elected officials who are willing to do that. You read the indictment and you find out that there was an attempt to find Ruby Freeman. Someone knocks on her door. I forget the names. There's so many of them to remember, so I'm sorry. He decides that because he's white, he needs somebody black to go and knock on the door of Ruby Freeman. So he enlists a guy from Blacks from Trump. I mean, this indictment reads like a political novel. It's crazy. So he finds someone black to knock on the door. Then he decides to fly someone in from Chicago to knock on the door, all to intimidate, lie, manipulate, make this woman feel and say to her that she's under attack, that she's in danger, and that she needs their protection. It is disgusting.
Phil, can you talk about what's happening with Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones? I know you also want to talk about some of the attorneys indicted as well.
Right, and just to set the stage for the viewers, I think that alternate electors have been done before in other election cycles. I brought up the Hawaii case where the Democrat Party of Hawaii, rightly so and legally so, they had their own. Yes, it is. They had their own alternative electors. And why? Because it was a tight election, just like Georgia's was. And so they ultimately, Nixon lost, JFK, Kennedy won, and so thank goodness for the Democrats, they had their electors there. Brian set the stage very well. Burt Jones was also one of those electors, now the lieutenant governor. And we saw, again, this is a big weakness of Fani Willis's case. She's conflicted already, and that's what the Trump lawyers are saying, and rightly so, in my opinion. She targeted Jones because she supported Charlie Bailey, his opponent, actually wrote a check for the Democrat opponent of Jones, actually attended a fundraiser, reprimanded even by the liberal judge for doing that. None of these electors should have been targeted in the beginning. And let's remember something, indictments are real easy to get. They're real easy to get. It's the convictions that are harder to get, and it's the criminal intent. And I'll give you one quick example. Ray Smith is a friend of mine. I've known him for 20 years. He's a very ethical, honest attorney, does the best he can for his clients. All he did was two things. He read to the hearing of the Georgia legislature the allegations of fraud, and that's what attorneys do. I don't see why he was cherry-picked out of it, and I don't see why any of them were cherry-picked out of it.
And Melita, I want to get to this part because there's also a Coffee County connection in this indictment that you've mentioned several times in the past on this show.
Right. There are 4 to 6 of those who were indicted who were involved in the theft of the software and data from Coffee County on the day after the insurrection, December the 7th. And then there are 12 unindicted co-conspirators who were also part of that Coffee County data theft. And the Secretary of State and the State Elections Board have known about these things for months and months. There's been the video. They've done nothing, and it's been turned over to the GBI, and they've really done nothing that we know of. So Fani Willis pulled this into the case as part of the overall RICO conspiracy.
Brian, I want to ask you this because I've heard a lot of Republicans talk about, well, can you ever question an election again? And Stacey Abrams did this also. So what is that argument there? Because it's a much different case with Stacey Abrams and what she said versus what Donald Trump did.
There may be some particulars that are different, but in the public's mind, what they saw was very similar. Someone who lost an election saying, no, they won. And Stacey said it over and over and over again. This has set a precedent for what we can see in the future. Republicans aren't going to sit on the sidelines and watch Democrats do this. As I've mentioned before, just imagine now, what if somebody crosses the border illegally when Kamala Harris didn't do enough to stop it, when Joe Biden didn't do enough to stop it? They kill somebody in Texas or Arizona. A local DA puts Biden and Harris in a criminal conspiracy. That's the kind of stuff that we could see. That's one example. That's what we can see moving forward. We could be moving into a situation where every president gets indicted by somebody, somewhere.
Alicia, final word on this.
Anyone who reads this indictment and doesn't see this as a criminal case, I worry about. Either you can't read, or maybe you're a part of this conspiracy yourself. And I feel very strongly about this because this was a conspiracy. Read it, see all of the lies and the manipulation, the text messages, the phone calls, the multiple phone calls and door knocks to Ms. Freeman. This was a concerted effort. Stop trying to compare, use your talking points for other things. This is a serious issue that has to be dealt with. Georgia voters, our votes were disenfranchised. There was an effort to usurp the will of the people, and these 19 people will and shall be held accountable.
You don't care about the First Amendment.
The Republicans are the party of personal responsibility. It is time for you to activate and have some courage, stand up for this Constitution and protect our democracy, period.
Phil, I'll give you 20 seconds. Go ahead.
Okay. I think a lot of this is protected speech, and also the First Amendment, a lot of people forget. You have a right to petition the government for grievances and Donald Trump certainly had some grievances. As for Coffee County, I've agreed with you on the danger of malware, Melita, but I do think it all started in the primary of 2020 in Coffee County when the elections folks saw that the QR codes were malfunctioning, and it came up QR code malfunction. They called Dominion. It was never fixed. What was the malfunction? It was only on the Republican primary ballots. That's what started the whole Coffee County thing.
And this is probably why we need an hour show. Coming up, a Cobb County teacher learns whether she can keep her job after reading a controversial book on gender identity to her 5th grade class.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
The tribunal overseeing the termination hearing for a Cobb County teacher who has been on leave for more than a month for reading a controversial children's book that discusses gender identity rejected the superintendent's recommendation to fire her. However, the school board had the final say and voted to terminate. Her attorney says she will appeal. Melita, you've been doing some reading. You've got the book in hand. Your
Yes.
thoughts on this?
Well, I think we are setting a dangerous precedent where parental objections determine what is read and taught in school above and beyond the professionally trained teachers. This was a partisan vote in Cobb County, and it undermines all teachers in the state of Georgia. Teachers are in short supply, and it instills fear in teachers for what they can do in the classroom.
Brian? We have school-age children in school. I want to say what my kids get to read.
Yeah, absolutely. And Virginia voters made that really clear when Governor McAuliffe said that parents should keep their mouths shut when it comes to school. He got beat. It's very important. And it's not just a matter of what parents think either. It's also what is in state law. And you can disagree with the state law, but it very explicitly was going after exactly content like this. And again, you can disagree. Run for state legislature if you want to change that law. But the Cobb board was trying to follow what the state has said. These are the rules. And this teacher knowingly violated it, probably trying to make a point. But I'll say there's a huge shortage in DeKalb County. I'm sure they'll hire over there.
Alicia?
I live in Cobb. Obviously, I've been following this. I will agree that parents should have a say, and I will also agree that she broke policy in Cobb County by not getting permission from parents to read this book. It could be considered controversial. My issue here is that this superintendent, who I know, is highly political, and I think this is a lot less about the book and parents and more about his politics and more about scoring points with additional Republicans. And so my concern is this is an exemplary teacher who's gotten all 4s on her evaluations over a decade. Cobb County has lost this very talented teacher, and I think this, as to your point, Melita, it sets a bad precedent that teachers are going to be afraid, that they're not going to be clear on what it is that's admissible and what's not, and a good example of putting politics over people and what's best for children and parents.
Philip, what about this blurry line? I mean, what are teachers going to have to be concerned about what they can teach and what they can't?
There is no blurred line. You have to follow your supervisors. And that's how you don't want the inmates running the insane asylum. But
it's my understanding this book was at the book fair.
It was at the book fair.
Yes, but this is for 5th grade. Actually, that's for K through 3, that book. And I think there's garbage in there that shouldn't be taught at that level. And I think Brian points out the state law, but someone's values have to prevail, and this is why you have school boards to oversee everything and superintendents. And I think common sense traditional values ought to prevail rather than teachers going willy-nilly off script and teaching, identify pronouns, gender. No, school boards have a right to say no, or in liberal areas they're going to say yes.
Melita, I can give you 10 seconds.
The tribunal sided with the teacher after a 2-day hearing, and they said the law was confusing and the policy was confusing.
They admitted, though, she broke policy by
I gotta
being
leave it there,
insubordinate.
Phil. I gotta leave it there. Coming up, winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
All right, we will start with Alicia this week.
Thank you. So we know that Beyonce was here this week. What a great concert she had. And so I want to make Fani Willis one of my winners. She's my alien superstar. and quite cozy. And if you are a Beyonce fan, you will understand exactly what that means.
We'll explain it later.
My second winner, Apple and Southern Company, they launched a free app called Propel, which is an innovation hub for HBCU students to help prepare them for future job success. Very excited about that. And my final winners are my Republican friends who understand that history is being made. And because of their courage to stand up, I'm talking Governor Kemp, I'm talking our Secretary of State, I'm talking Jeff Duncan. Thank you for standing up, and we need more Republicans who will do that.
Phil.
Well, I'm making Fani Willis the loser. I know you're shocked at that, my Democrat friends here. Total overreach, and I think she's got a very weak case. There's another loser, and that's the Court of Appeals Judge Christian Coomer, who ripped off a client when he was an attorney. I'm glad he's gone off the bench.
Melita, I got 44 seconds.
Former First Lady Rosalynn Carter celebrated her 96th birthday quietly at home in Plains on Friday with cupcakes, peanut butter ice cream, and the release of monarch butterflies.
Aw, happy birthday to her. Brian.
My losers, I never do losers, so here are my losers. Patrick Nally, who was the Brookhaven Parks and Rec director, who was arrested in Cobb County trying to meet who he thought was a 14-year-old girl. Good riddance to that guy. And my other loser is whoever Prosecuting Attorneys Council leader Pete Scandalakis appoints to investigate Burt Jones, a thankless task on all sides.
And we will leave it there. Thanks so much for watching and sticking around. We'll see you at normal time next week.